Our next guest, of course, is a friend, a longtime friend of Dave Nemo, myself, and the Road Gang, and just thrilled to welcome Kevin Lindsey, the manager of technical service for Travel Centers of America. He is in the midst of Super Tech, and he joins us now from Super Tech. Hey, Kevin, good morning. How you doing?
If I was any better, there'd be two of me, Jimmy.
I understand. Hey, my brother, let's talk for a minute about and by the way, I couldn't feel more the same this morning. Let's talk a little bit before we get to HVAC maintenance and how to do all the checks on that about what truckers mean to you. I mean, you've met so many of them over the years, and I don't want to get maudlin about this, but I have to tell you, I came into this by some degree by accident, and I have to tell you, it's one of the best happy accidents I've ever had in my life. You've had a little bit more of a direct route to these men and women, but can you talk a little bit about truckers and your experiences with them?
Well, you know, actually, truckers to me mean America.
Yep.
I mean, we couldn't. There's nothing we could do in this country. There's nothing we could go by. I mean, we couldn't walk into a building because we wouldn't have the building without truckers. You know, it's such an intertwined fabric of what is, what's become our society and our country. And it to me, it's probably the most underappreciated industry that we have out here. Uh, most truckers, and most technicians, most of us that try to keep these wheels turning and going up and down the road and driving them up and down the road and everything. Uh, we just do our job.
I,
I
I,
don't know. I don't know how else to say that. I can't. I can't put into good words. How much I appreciate. Our industry, truck drivers. Everybody from the truck drivers to the forklift drivers in the warehouses. All of these little bits and pieces that are out there. It's just it's so critical. To keeping us going.
I, over the course of the almost decade that I've sat in this chair in one form or another and talked to the microphone, Kevin, and one of the things that's so cool about this segment, and it actually kind of connects to one of the amazing insights I've had. I know a lot of people who will work at like a data center, people who will work
Mhm.
a part-time job, who have no understanding of what it is they do. I mean, look, they know what they're doing. I mean, I don't mean that they don't like, they don't serve
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
they don't serve you turpentine when they work at a coffee shop. I mean, that they don't do that.
yeah,
I don't mean that. But the number of people, the number of truck drivers that I have met who actually understand not only what they're supposed to do from a technical perspective, who not only understand what they're supposed to do from like, giving their word that they're going to do a job, is that they understand where they fit in the fabric of American life. And I think you said
yeah.
it best. I mean, you said, I don't know how to put it, but you said when they said they're Americans. I haven't met a group of people with maybe the exception of a couple of firemen, and I have met there's been a couple of people who I have met in the medical industry who really understand the role they play, not just in their industry, but in the fabric of American society more than truckers and people in the transportation industry. They really get it. They really get who they are and
Yeah,
what they're
yeah,
supposed to do. Does that make sense?
yeah. That's true. That's true. And I think quite honestly, and that kind of there's a lot of ebb and flow to that over the years too. Uh, some periods of time it may not be quite as strong as everyone that's doing these little jobs all realize their part, but regardless, it always comes back around to they do because it's kind of cyclical, and always kind of has been. And it'll, it's amazing to me when I really stop and look out. I'm extremely proud to be part of the transportation industry here in North America, and it's I just I just know what would happen if none of us did our jobs. You know,
Oh yeah,
all of our little bitty jobs. We're all these little. Sometimes we may feel insignificant in what we do. Like you said, from that person that may be working remote, sitting at their home right now in front of a laptop doing data processing. They're but that information that they're doing is critical to someone somewhere on that team that helps that whole organization they're working for keep everything going.
Yeah,
It's kind of crazy.
and like I said, and then that data person often doesn't understand where they sit and what they're doing. Whereas everybody I have met, literally in the trucking industry, it's like, oh, I know what I'm
Yeah.
delivering. I know that it's
Yeah.
important. The idea that I don't know if you know this, but Junker, he writes me about every other morning to tell me what he's picking up and where he's going and what he's doing, and his understanding of not just the load itself, but what the load is going to do for people it's always remarkable
Yeah.
to me. It never
How
ceases to
many
come.
jobs,
Yeah,
how many jobs are there that's tied to that load that he's delivered, right? In some plant somewhere, or whatever, right?
yeah.
There's many people counting on that getting there and on time.
Now here's the pressure that comes on you, and this is both from the military, what you learned in the military, what you learned from your grandpa on the farm, but also what you've learned here. Once you know that they know, then it becomes even more important for you to give them the right information in regards to making sure not only that when you have to do repairs, those repairs get done right, but actually putting them in a position. It's the weirdest job you have, because if you do it absolutely right with like really important customers, those who actually do the other half of the lifting, which is staying in touch with you and talking to you, your job is to see less of them. It ain't like a
It
barber.
is,
It ain't like a barber. It's
yeah,
National
yeah,
Barber Day where you have to go once a month or you look like Joe from Lower Slobovia. It's like this is one of those things where you want to go every 6 months, make sure everything is working, and then be gone and not have to come back, right?
yeah, and not have to come back. Precisely, and that's one of those hard things. It's get to really wrap your head around the fact that if you do your job extremely well, you don't get to see and interact with those people, your customers, whatever, near as much. But that means your place doing all this, you're getting it going. The same with those drivers. If they don't get it from point A to point B, on time, when it's supposed to be, or in good shape, it kind of throws a little bit of a little bit of a cog in that wheel off a tooth a little bit, so it can disrupt things. So
I tell you,
it's kind of crazy when you stop and think about it.
I tell you,
It's like
really,
a well-tuned clock, right?
yeah. I mean, that's exactly. I'll tell you a really fun story that kind of sums this up really nicely from a four-wheel perspective. My brother and I ran a weatherization company. He was the owner of it, and kind of together with a partner of his, we ran it together. But the thing is, it's so neat about it is the guy who did all the work on his trucks, the guy who did the maintenance on the installation trucks and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We would fill up at his gas station, and the gas, of course, because it was really a mechanic shop, but he had gas pumps. Somebody once asked my brother, he's like, raise prices are not significantly, but enough to be, cost, to make you kind of think twice about the cost. And my brother said, he said, because of Ray and because I listen to Ray's advice, I don't have to go see Ray a lot for a lot of stuff. And I want to make sure that Ray gets my business in one way or another. And he said, I fill up at Ray's place because it's my way of thanking him for not having to be in his shops on a regular basis. And
Bingo.
it's interesting. He's like, I would rather spend a little bit of extra money at the pump with Ray because Ray has always been good to me about telling me not how I have to keep coming and seeing him, but Ray has always been on top of me saying, like, I want you to see me less. So my brother liked Ray so much he would drop in and just fill up over there. Okay. I want to ask you about Super Tech really quickly, what's going on over there, and then we'll kind of pivot into HVAC stuff. Talk to me about what you've been seeing the last couple of days.
Oh, some of the top technicians in this country running around, and I've been part of the committees and chairs for the different stations that we built here at SuperTech, and got to watch them scratch their heads a few times. So we, because that's just it. That's one thing we do with these competitions is try to, let the cream rise to the top, so to speak. So you really want to test these guys, because some of these guys, it's amazing the amount of knowledge they have. They how much they study and prepare for these things, and it, it's just, I don't know. It's one of the best things, best times of year, other than being away from home for almost 7 straight days. That's the only thing I don't like about it.
Yeah, it is. It's the best of the best. And Dave was on the show yesterday talking about it, and he calls it, of course, he said is one of the most quietly intense environments he's ever been in his life. That he said just
Oh,
watching
yeah,
people watching. He said just people looking at
yeah.
stuff, just kind of get a sense of it, a scope of what it is they're going to be dealing with before they kind of leap in and get quietly to work. He said it's one of the most intense events that he's ever been to in his life. And Michael Freeze was here yesterday talking about his coverage of it. And there is so much going on. We'll dig into that in the aftermath of it. Okay. So one of my grand traditions at the beginning of every summer is I make a joke that I go in and I get my HVAC tested and looked at, because if I don't, I can promise you, literally on June the 1st in the city of New Orleans, my air conditioning in my car will break without fail. So I try to get it checked out in April, in the middle of May, before the summer really kicks in. Let's talk about some HVAC points of maintenance for the cab, and for the men and women who need to maintain comfort, because we were talking about yesterday a time when people didn't have air conditioning, and boy, that is a very different sort of world to exist in. So let's talk about how we go about maintaining the overall air conditioning system, the HVAC in our cab, and in the world that we exist in trucking.
Well, first of all, I want to kind of throw this out there. Maybe some people wondering why here it is, late September. Why did I choose HVAC to talk about? Well, because you've been running that HVAC for the last few months, right? And hopefully it's been working well for you and everything's going good. But kind of the kicker that a lot of people don't realize is it's important for it to work properly throughout the winter as well. So, as we move into the cooler weather, because whether you realize it or not, most modern heavy duty trucks is going to cycle that AC compressor on and off. It's when you're in defrost mode. So to help dry some of the air out inside the cab to keep the windshield clear. So, that's one reason I always try to bring it up sometime in the fall as well, because it's very critical when it gets hot outside, but it's still critical even in the winter to try to help keep defrost the defrost mode working properly and everything. But some of the things you can always do though is always pay attention to how the airflow is coming out of the vents, things like that. Is everything still working on all speeds? I know it's one of those things, probably in our own vehicles, those of us that drive cars back and forth, or pickups or whatever back and forth. A lot of times we may not move that blower position, to a whole lot, but it's a good idea to cycle it, everything, to do with the temperature knobs, all of that. That helps all of the sensors and motors and servos that work in those systems for different blend air systems and stuff like that to actually function and move. Because when you stop and think about it, the one unique thing about dealing with trucks is there's, especially trucks that run on an inline 6-cylinder diesel engine, there's an inherent vibration that's always there. You may not always feel it, but it's always there just by the design of the way everything works. So if you've got two different a component somewhere that stays in the same position for too long as you go down the road with these vibrations that we may not necessarily always feel, because that's one thing the OEMs do so well nowadays for drivers and everything, is to try to isolate those vibrations so the drivers don't feel them, because I think that's one of those things we don't think about, but something that vibrates actually can make you tireder and quicker.
Oh,
So
Oh, can we talk about what it does to your hearing? Can we talk about what
Yeah.
ultimately, like 15 years in a vibrating box, what it can do to your hearing ultimately, and with the long-term damage to your life, and the possibilities of setting you up for dementia and isolation? I mean, it's like, I mean, this is serious business. I mean, this is a way that you can really improve the quality of your life by simply kind of keeping up with this thing. Kevin, I wanted to make a really quick comment before I lose the thought, and about you talking about HVAC in September, which is really cool. I don't know if you know this, but when Brian Kelly took over Notre Dame, when he first got the job, he actually found out that at the end of the year, the average Notre Dame offensive lineman had lost 18 pounds over the course of the season. And he basically turned to his strength coach and said, "This is a matter of maintenance." And these young men are literally getting physically manhandled by the end of the football season. The same concept sort of applies here, is that, it would not be a bad idea at the end of the summer to really go through and check all of that stuff, because it means it sets you up for the following summer in better shape for how to maintain your HVAC, so that you don't walk into September blowing cooler than you did when you first started the summer adventure of driving. I mean, that's a really great point. This is a great time to do this sort of evaluation, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, and I love that analogy. Of course, I love any analogy that you can tie with truck, anything to do with trucks to football. So
Yeah.
that's just me. That's
No, but I mean, Kevin, I mean, it was one of the biggest wake up calls of all time. And somebody
oh
said,
yeah, yeah,
how did Alabama and how did Notre Dame become tight end U? And what they did was
yeah,
they realized they had to keep the weight on
and
the football player, as opposed to people. One person said, "Oh God, they lost 18 pounds. Boy, that's really really doing it right." I'm like
well, you,
going,
you
"That's a
think about that.
disaster." You know.
Yeah, because you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-old young men and I stop and I think back when I was in that age range. Losing that kind of weight means I probably lost some muscle mass with that.
Absolutely.
Why? How does it? You can't let that happen. In those circumstances, you got to keep that up, because now you're going to get tired quicker. You're going to get manhandled, like you said.
I got a,
Yeah,
I got a,
absolutely.
I got a really funny story for you. When I played high school football, Bo Higgins, who was here last week, he played on that team. There were guys who played on that team that won won a lot of games. And one of the things that was changed was a lot of those guys would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and eat giant bowls of cottage cheese with pineapples in them, and then go back to bed and wake up and eat a full breakfast to keep the weight on them from what was going on. And what you're kind of outlined here is in some ways is what is it? A health plan, a maintenance plan for your HVAC. I mean, so like I said, I mean, you've already started to kind of dig into this, but take us through all of the steps that you should do to make sure that what you're doing is actually creating the life that you want, because you made mention of that long low rumble, that slowly but surely wears you down and physically tires you out. I keep interrupting you because I'm excited
Yeah.
about this topic. I know a little bit about it, but go on, please.
Well, I was, what my real point here is, you check how is the airflow coming out of the vents. Change the mode. Instead of, it's been sitting there blowing, what I always call the face mode, where it's blowing out the dash vents, all summer long and everything. Turn it to defrost for a little while. Turn it to the floor. Make sure all of that works, because there's little motors in there that work off of electronics and electronic signals and just general power in the truck that those things may not have moved too much. And like I was alluding to earlier, that truck's been going down the road. All these little pieces and plastic gears inside of these things have been sitting in the same spot for months, vibrating. So that can create little divots in these things, that so when you go to move them, they may kind of hang, they may kind of slip. You want to move them around a little bit every now and then, just to help keep the evenly dispersed wear. I know that sounds funny for something like this, but it's one of the little things that a lot of times we just don't think about. So things like that. Your doors. How well are your doors sealing? Still, because again, that door, you've opened it many times, especially the driver's door. over the last few months. Is it still sealing good? Are you hearing air come in? Are you feeling air coming in? That also means you've got AC that you're losing. Because now you've got allowed heat to come in from the outside in those spots, and then when you get in the winter, you're going to allow the heat that's inside to go out. So it's so you got to make sure you got all that done. And I could never stress enough about air filters. And I know it seems like no matter what subject I end up talking about, I go back to air filters.
Oh, my friend,
But air filters
you are
are so
preaching.
critical.
You're preaching to the choir here, by the way, and it's like literally the number of times. And by the way, Kevin and I going back and forth here because, like I said, there are things I've always made a point of. If I don't know what the hell you're talking about, it's a moment for me to learn. Let me tell you something, my friend. I can't agree with you more. The number of times we used to walk into houses and be like, my brother's partner, who I called an African-American Viking, used to play football for Nebraska. He'd walked in and be like, nobody's changed the air filters in here in over a decade. I mean, he would literally walk in and say that. And we'd open up the air filter, man, in HVAC houses. And, and it would be like, what in the name of Pearl are you doing here? What are you doing? And it's the simplest way. It's the easiest and simplest way to maintain maintenance. It really is. Just change, when in doubt, change the filter. Just change it. I mean, it never hurts. If you think there might be a problem, start with the filter. Have you turned it on and off? I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, it's just that simple, right?
Absolutely.
And that sealant.
Oh, it is. It is.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things I've always recommended to drivers, customers, fleet, and everything when it comes to air filters for your HVAC. Whether it's a fresh air filter that may be mounted on the front wall on the firewall outside the truck under the hood, or a recirculation filter that's inside up front. If and of course you got the bunk, you've got a filter back there, so you could have at least 3 of those. And if you got like a parked no idle AC system, then it's got another air filter itself. So at minimum, I would say every 6 months, just change those things out. You're going to be better. And I don't mean this in any kind of negative way, but our furry friends are a lot of truck drivers' best friends, and if you have one of those, you really should at least every 6 months, maybe 3 months, depending on the amount of fur that furry friend can lose inside the cab of that truck. So.
Yeah, because air is cycling. Whatever is being brought in is being pulled out as well, too. And when it's pulling that air out, it's pulling a lot of other things that are actually inside of that air, which is such an important thing. There's an interesting note you have here that I totally get, and I want you to explain it. We're going to run out of time here and come back and just, I mean, can you believe how fast these things go by? Okay, Kevin.
It's fine.
Kevin, talk about, you said windows rolled down, and explain why. This is really cool.
I realized I left that in there. That's actually some of the things I always tell technicians when they're checking a performance check for an AC system. And it's something a driver can do. You turn everything on, turn it high. It's not how cold you can get the inside of that truck. What you really want to do is open the doors, have the windows open. You want to try to, as my daddy used to say, close that door. You're trying to cool the whole world. Well, that's what you want to do to see how efficient that AC is actually working.
Yeah, oh yeah, man.
I mean, that's to make it work at its optimal, and make sure it does okay when you do that. So.
Well, this is unrelated, Kevin, but I remember I used to have a friend who was so proud of what his with the heating and cooling system in his convertible would do was he would deliberately put his top down and turn his AC up in the summer, and in the winter turn the heater up, and you would literally get in the car with the top down and feel better.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's amazing,
and it's true because because I mean you're making it work, and you know what? It's designed to work. So let it do its job. Make sure it can do its job. Let it. We all, every now and then, we all like to, try to, I'm an old guy, but still, every now and then I like to get out there and just see how fast I can run real quick, something like that. You want to go all out for just a minute, just to make sure you still got it in
there. Oh, you mean like I did this weekend with the Travis Manion run? Oh my God! I turned to my friend at the end and I said, "Yeah, we did it, and we ain't gonna do it again for a year."
Yeah, exactly right.
You got to put it in there.
Yeah.
Kevin, we're out of time. Promise me when we come back next week, we will continue this conversation. There's so much more to cover. I promise you, I won't get you in the weeds with Notre Dame football tight end talk and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, I'll make a deal with you, though. How about we wait till the week after next? I think we have the Castrol guys next week.
Oh, we do. So, yeah, that's good. That's exact. Actually, I just checked the calendar. He's absolutely right. We now got plenty to talk about this next week and the week after, man. It never ends. Thank you, brother.
That's right.
It is great to have the manager of technical service at TravelCenters of America, Mr. Kevin Lindsey, who is a founding member of the reconstituted Road Gang, joining us this morning. He's actually doing the Lord's work, checking the work of some of the best in the business over at SuperTech. Can't wait to talk about that. HVACs, talk with the guys from Castrol. We got a big fall planned, and Kevin is a big part of it. Thank you for joining us on National Truck Driver Appreciation Week, my friend.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Kevin.